Welcome to Innovo Radio, your place to gather insight and wisdom for creating healthy organizations. Discover how to uncover defects in your organization and find ways to be a powerful force of change for your organization. Here's your host, David Phillips.
This is David from the Innovative Leader Podcast, and sorry for not being around for a little while. Last year was obviously a rough year for a lot of people, and in the midst of that, I actually started another podcast with a friend of mine. She is a coach, an executive coach, and it's called The Innovative Leader. And you can find that at innovativeleader.co or look for that on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. The Innovative Leader, do a search for that. And so I spent a lot of time once a week working on that one, and we're still going to be doing that one. I just wanted to kind of get back into the motion of doing one on my own and doing something that's a little bit different than the Innovative Leader. But anyway, so today I want to just kind of touch on a few things in regards to systems. The new year is one of those times when you can begin to develop new systems and processes to get your life back on track, get your business on track, get your organization back on track, or to look at those systems and processes that you have currently and be able to adjust and tweak and those kinds of things. So today, I want to talk a little bit about designing a system. A lot of this actually flows out of the idea of software development. I do that as well, or have done that in the past. I don't necessarily do that now. But so a lot of these ideas really do flow out of that. We also need to consider the fact that we will essentially be creating, in many cases, a system of systems or a workflow of workflows, a workflow of systems. And so when we talk about creating systems, in a minute we're going to talk about breaking things down into component parts. You're going to want to do that. So you may create microsystems so that the systems and processes that you have, or that you are creating, or that you are evaluating, get done, because we all have systems within the system to make those systems work effectively. And so just a heads up on that. So let's get into designing a system, or essentially designing a system of systems or workflow of systems, how you wanted to define that. The first thing that you need to do is to identify the problem, the goal, the issue that you're trying to solve. So let's say you are trying to lose weight. That's a problem. And you are going to develop a system or a set of systems to help you feel better, look better, be a healthy person. And so the goal, the issue really is that you may not be healthy. You may be heavily overweight, for instance, and so you need to figure out the pieces that will allow you to develop a healthier lifestyle. And the question that you might need to ask in all of that is, will this make me a healthier person? And that's a valid question. So one of those questions that we need to ask, we need to be able to ask when we are doing something, because so much of us function and live in the concept of habits and those habits oftentimes are unknown to us, so they're automatic. We don't even realize what's going on. We don't realize we're doing some of those things, and so that's why some of this is going to be very important. So identify the problem or the goal or the issue or the concern that you have, and then you've got to do an assessment here. One of the things you have to do is you have to look back to look forward. You have to look back and say, how did we get here? What are the things that we have done to get here? Because oftentimes you have made decisions that maybe you didn't even realize you were making decisions, but you've made decisions that has brought you to this place and to where you're overweight, or where your organization is beginning to bleed finances, or where you've just got some systems that are not functioning or not effective right now. So ask that question. Do an assessment. How did we get here? What decisions? What actions? What pieces of what we're doing? What habits have we done that have gotten us to this point? So there's that assessment part of it. So assess, and then once you've done that assessment, begin to break down that problem, that goal, that issue into component parts, and you've got to be specific. So let's take losing weight, for instance. It's one of the things that my wife and I are trying to do personally, and for the first part of the new year, and we're trying to do a reset on our eating, those kinds of things. So the component parts of a healthy lifestyle, let's say exercise is a component part, or just movement in general. Let's say eating healthy is a component part. Let's say wellness checks are an important part. Let's say there are things that you need to stop doing. For instance, maybe if you're a smoker, so that is a negative. It's a downside. So that's a component part. Okay, and so you break each of those, break this problem, break this concept or this issue down into its component parts. And when you do that, then you can begin to create these microsystems to help you overcome, deal, process that main goal. So break it down into component parts and be very, very specific. The next thing you need to do is identify how the components fit together. So the problem is too often we just take, I'm going to exercise more. For instance, in this case, well, exercise is good, but exercise doesn't do anything unless you're eating healthy. So you have to see how these pieces begin to fit together, because you can't just do things in isolation, and you don't do things in isolation. If you make a change in one area of your organization, or one area of your life, or one aspect of your business, then it's going to have consequences as that system begins to function. So it may impact how other systems work together. It may impact the inputs and the outputs of those systems, and so you may need to take a look at how all of this fits together. I taught a class last fall. One of the things that we do when I teach that class on entrepreneurial leadership is we look at systems theory, and how too often organizations try to solve problems within a community, and they're not looking at how pieces fit together. So, for instance, you've got an organization that I have a friend in Annapolis, Maryland. They have a homeless issue, and So you had organizations trying to deal with the homeless issue. Well, oftentimes a homeless issue is not an issue, not simply an issue of somebody not having a house. And the reasons for that are going to be varied based on location. So, for instance, there's a huge homeless issue in Los Angeles, and one of the factors for that is mental health. So you've got a lot of people who have mental health issues that can't work, that can't do, can't hold down a job, that struggle with so many things that they don't have the mindset or the resources to have a place to live. And then you've also got the cost of living issues that exist within Los Angeles, and you factor in all of that. And so you've just got this huge homelessness issue, and a lot of it is centered around mental health. And so if you just try to go find, help somebody find a place to spend the night, or a place to stay, or a place to live, then, you've kind of touched on the outcome of the problem, but you haven't addressed the issue of it in and of itself. My friend, the issue of homelessness in the Annapolis, Maryland area is one of opioid addiction. And so you really have to begin to look behind the scenes and see how all these components fit together. Because you have opioid addiction that is causing homelessness in one sense. And so when you try to meet that homelessness issue, you've really got to step back and look at the issue of opioid addiction. And so you've got to address that piece, not so much the homeless piece. I mean, obviously you want someone to have a place to stay and someplace, in this case, to detox. But ultimately the issue is opioid addiction. And so if you set out to just solve the homeless problem, then you've got to figure out why that homeless problem exists. In the case in Annapolis, potentially it is opioid addiction. So you've got to begin to address that, break that problem down, and figure out how to help people in terms of dealing with a drug addiction, so that they don't end up being homeless. And so when you identify when you break those components down, you got to get real specific, number one. And number two, you've got to figure out how those components all fit together. So you have to determine, one of the things you have to determine is the order or the priority of those components. So if we were potentially looking at the opioid addiction in Annapolis, you've got opioid addiction that comes before. It's a higher priority than, or it's the root cause of homelessness. What you might need to do is find someone a place to stay, and so that they're at least out of the rain and the cold, and then you've got to address the opioid issue. And so you've got to figure out how those pieces fit together, and which one is actually the primary cause and the primary issue, and then the consequences of that issue. And you've got to prioritize, determine that order, determine that priority. What needs to happen first when you're trying to solve this problem? What needs to happen first? The second thing in that, when you're identifying these components and how they fit together, is determine the inputs and the outputs. In this case, there are things that, so for instance, homelessness, again, we'll kind of go back to that. The input to homelessness is actually opioid addiction. The output of opioid addiction is homelessness, potentially. And so you've got to figure out if I am going to take this issue and I've broken it down into these components, and I'm going to take each of these components and I'm going to prioritize, I'm going to order them so that I know how to deal with the issues at hand. Now, what's it going to take to make a change into that component? And if I make this change, what's going to be the outcome? What's going to result when I make that change in that component? We'll go back to the eating issue. We've broken our eating issues, our healthy lifestyle, into food, exercise, wellness, and then stop smoking, for instance. I don't smoke, but we'll just throw that one in there. And let's take the food one. Okay, so right now, from an input standpoint, you could be putting in bad things. It could be putting in a lot of Coke, it could be soda, a lot of fatty foods, a lot of high carb foods, those kinds of things. So you have to figure out what inputs are going to have to change to eat healthier. So more greens, less carbs, less fat, ever how you want to define that piece. So if you do that, if you have more, if you eat more greens, if you eat more protein, if you eat less carbs, if you take out sodas, if you take out candy and sugar, what's the output of that going to be? Well, potentially you're going to lose weight, number one, but number two, you're going to have more energy. And more energy can be one of the inputs of exercise. And so you've got more energy to exercise. You've got more energy to get healthy. You've got more energy to not make the decision to smoke, for instance. And so you begin to determine the inputs and the outputs and what's needed to make those changes, and not only make those changes, but what's going to be the result of the change of each of those components. The third thing is then you begin to develop processes or systems to deal with each of those components. You need to kind of do what I have determined as develop flow. And what that means is, so I've taken that component, I'm going to break that component down, and so now I'm essentially going to identify things like decision points. When does this happen? When I'm trying to eat well, and do I go to a fast food restaurant or not? Yes or no. If I do go to a fast food restaurant, which one am I going to? Make a choice. At that fast food restaurant, what am I going to get? Maybe it's the grilled chicken salad. And so you set up these decision points, and you essentially answer them. You go ahead and answer them, so the decision is essentially already made. So you identify those decision points, and then you build the responses. Again, that's you essentially have an answer for the decision, and you're going to do this in each of those decision points. So you develop this process. You develop processes for each component. I'm going to do this to deal with my eating issues, my unhealthy eating issues, and then you develop this flow. When I go out to eat, I'm going here, I'm going to get this. If friends want to go out, here are the 3 or 4 choices that I'm going to suggest. If I go here, I'm going to go eat that. If I'm going to go here, I'm going to eat that. So you see what's going on there. So you build those decision responses, and then you organize them and develop them. And then you begin to build a system. I am going to let's go to the eating thing again. I'm going to discard all of the unhealthy food, and I am going to build in those decision points. I'm going to build in the responses. I've got everything organized, and so I'm going to make the decision to buy healthy food. This is what I'm going to get. I'm going to plan. I'm going to organize. I am going to build a menu each week, and then I'm going to go get the food for that menu, and I'm not going to get anything else. I might get some nuts for snacks or fruit for snacks, those kinds of things, and then you begin to build out your system. If you're beginning to look at the opioid addiction, that issue, so we've broken that down. How am I going to deal with that opioid issue that's resulting in homelessness? I am going to build a system, build a system and develop that. And then you test it. Actually, in many cases, you're just going to execute. You're going to execute the system. You're going to start the system up. You're going to let it go, and then you're going to test it. You're going to see how it functions, and then you need 30, 60, 90, 180 days of feedback. You need to develop feedback loops in that so that you can get an understanding of what's going on, the impact that it's having all the way down the road in every other system, and then you begin to revise it. You begin to tweak it. So the last part is to test it, and then as you're testing it, to revise it, and then that becomes a circular process. You rebuild it, test it, develop feedback, and then tweak it or revise it. Rebuild it, test it, get feedback, tweak it or revise it, rebuild it. And so you just do this process over and over and over, and until you get it functioning in a healthy way. You get the system functioning in a healthy way. You get each of those component systems, those microsystems, functioning in a healthy way. And if you do that, if you break things down like that, then you're not focusing so much on I'm going to be well. You're doing small things. You're making small choices as opposed to trying to think of this trying to handle and manage this overwhelming complex problem. And you're making, as James Clear says in Automatic Habits, you're doing 1% of growth every day. And so you just break things down into smaller components. Test it, revise it, get feedback, test it, revise it. So you're doing this. Your life is in a constant state of evaluation. And when you do that, then your life, your business gets better. The other thing is, the one thing I have left out is you got to define success. And that's the thing that we need to, what does it look like for this system or the system of systems to be successful? And so you make that definition. And so you revise, you test, get feedback, revise, test, get feedback, revise, test, get feedback, until you have hit that success mark. And I'm not talking about I'm going to lose 30 pounds. I'm talking about I'm going to be a healthy person, for instance, or from an opioid addiction / homelessness that we have this system that if people follow this system and follow these processes, that they can move from a destructive lifestyle to a productive lifestyle. They can have their own home. They can pay rent or maybe even purchase a house, do those kinds of things. Define success. And define success in the concept of a system so that it's something that you can continue. These actions become something that you can continue because oftentimes we set a goal, I'm going to lose 30 pounds, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, I'm going to lose 100 pounds. And we hit that goal and it's now what? So we have to think bigger than that. We have to think healthy lifestyle. We have to think ending homelessness. We have to think ending the opioid addiction. And we set up those systems, we set up those processes so that it can be something that becomes automatic. It becomes almost an automatic habit that doesn't have to, that essentially doesn't end. Because when you hit that goal and that's all you have in mind, then the question becomes, what next? And if you don't have a what next, then oftentimes you can slide back into ineffective behaviors, ineffective actions, bad choices that can hurt your organization, hurt you physically, hurt you spiritually, hurt you financially, all of those things. So those are some things that to think about when you are looking at designing systems. That's something that's important, again, at the first of the year. And if you have any questions, I sure would love to help you work through those, some of those questions. I'd love to hear some of the systems that you've designed, that kind of thing. And so leave that in the comments. Also, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the podcast on iTunes. Helps us get noticed. Please leave any comments in the comments section. Go to the website at wdavidphillips.com, and we look forward to our next episode. Thanks. Hey, I would love for you to send me a message. Go to anchor.fm/Innova Radio and click send a message, and I'd love to hear your message, and I would love to share it as part of our podcast. So feel free to do that, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks for listening in today, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode of Powerful Insight. For more up-to-date information and tips to help you on your quest for change, head over to the website at www.wdavidphillips.com and sign up for our newsletter.